He hires a junior programmer, then the junior programmer would be one who's trained to drive the AI.
I do think programmers are fine. Actually, there were some stats that I saw the other day that showed there's been this huge demand and people trying to hire programmers. It's interesting because you hear stats from Spotify.
Yeah.
Spotify saying, we haven't written a human line of code since December.
Yeah.
And I'm very good friends with the guys at Spotify. I was actually with the CEO the other day, a couple of weeks ago in Austin. And you hear that, and I did check that with them. That's true. So you assume that that means we don't need programmers anymore. But if you think about like Jevons Paradox, when something becomes, Jevons Paradox is the old analogy.
It's cheaper, you use more of it.
Yeah. So like when coal became cheaper, people were worried that maybe the coal industry was out of business or trains, whatever. But actually what ended up happening is people just drove more trains and they used them for other things like transport.
Yeah.
And the same applies, I think, for AI. When creating technology becomes easier, every company starts using more technology. So media companies, lawyers, you name the company, executive assistants, they all become coders. And actually the demand for really anyone who knows how to code or program, we're seeing it, it's exploding.
Yeah.
But I just think the job disruption in the near term for most people is going to be pretty.
Yeah. I mean, there's ways in which AI and robotics should be welcomed because it means the possibility exists, and it's only a possibility, that we can no longer have to be exploited to get an income. Because if you look at the Marxist attitude towards capitalism as capitalists exploit the workers. Okay? The real world is we've been exploiting energy mutually. Both labour and capital exploits energy. We could have a future where we don't have to work for a living, and therefore you could do what you want to do for a living. That's the Star Trek future. That's the possibility that it promises. But at the same time, it could actually eliminate the jobs that people currently rely upon. And what I fear is we have two possibilities. We have a future where, Star Trek type future, where you have replicators that make the goods and we consume, and we all live an energy abundant life, or the Hunger Games, where there's one little elite that has all the robots and lives extremely well, and we tolerate and oppress the vast majority, and they end up, Hunger Game entertainment. Those are the two possibilities we face.
I do think the cost of goods and services will come down, which is great.
Yeah.
I think robotics, if Elon is right, and I often say with Elon, like his timelines are not always accurate, but he does tend to deliver magic.
He ultimately delivers, but he always overpromises and delivers later than he plans.
And if he's right about when he says there's going to be more humanoid robots, his Optimus robots, than humans, and he says also in his predictions that there's going to be no need to study to be a surgeon because the robots are going to be so much more advanced and better than any living surgeon, that would imply that surgery and other sort of medical diagnoses and procedures are going to be incredibly cheap, incredibly quick. Great.
How do you pay for them? That's the next question.
Yeah. So, how do you pay for them? And do people want to,
it's also the physical requirements. I mean, the amount of copper inside a robot, you're talking, several kilos per robot. Do we have enough to produce 8 billion of them?
And maybe, surgeons do much more than just operate.
Yeah.
There's a human element to the medical profession, which I think is sometimes unappreciated. Like I don't know if I'm quite ready to go talk to a robot about my health yet. Maybe I'll adjust. I wanted to come back to something you actually said earlier. You talked about Bitcoin briefly.
Yeah.
I've heard you say that you think Bitcoin's going to zero.
Yeah.
Okay, this is worrying. I think I have some Bitcoin. You're an economist.
Yeah.
You're saying that Bitcoin is going to zero. Why?
Ultimately because of its reliance upon energy. I mean, you know Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert. Have you met them at all?
No.
They were sort of the original proselytizers for Bitcoin, and they're now living in, I think, El Salvador, which has adopted Bitcoin as a form of currency. When they told me about Bitcoin, I could have bought it for £1 of Bitcoin, which would have been, I would have been maybe wealthier than you if I'd done that. The reason I didn't was they explained that the way that the public ledger is kept safe is that it takes too much energy to break it. So each transaction requires 10 minutes of computer processing time globally, by the looks of it, to actually create an extra Bitcoin. And that means it's too expensive for somebody to try to break the ledger. That means it's got a huge requirement for energy use. And I believe knowing what I know from climate scientists, that at some point we're going to realise we're using far too much energy on the planet. We've got to cut the energy consumption. And the two easiest things to cut out to reduce energy consumption are cryptocurrencies and international travel.
But aren't you saying that, nuclear energy is becoming vogue again? And they're talking a lot, about...
It's the amount of time it takes to build that stuff. I mean, China's building nuclear power stations at a hell of a rate and much, much cheaper, more cheaply than America is doing.
Solar's become a big topic of conversation.
Yeah, again, there's a guy called Simon Maichow, whom I recommend you get in touch with as well. And Simon is an engineer who claims that we simply don't have the physical minerals necessary to support a completely solar and wind-based energy system. He's got people who criticise his analysis, definitely, but we still are using far more physical resources than we're aware of at the moment on the planet. And the availability of various critical elements that we need for the system we have right now, it's much less abundant than we would like it to be. So a lot of these things about, robotics taken over, do we have the minerals for it? Solar power, do we have the minerals? The answer is not yes, okay? Sometimes the answer is no. Other times it's dubious. But I think that energy requirement alone is a problem.
You're saying that we're going to have to cut back on our energy consumption.
Yeah.
But I mean, the direction of travel has been we've been able to produce more and more and more and more energy.